I'm a measurement guy. I actually went to Cambridge University to read mathematics, and I discovered that mathematics doesn't involve many numbers, mainly Greek letters and proof. And I decided that I actually was really an applied statistician, and I started to think about social problems from a statistical perspective. Um, and I, I guess that's how I've spent my life. But when Mariano then was talking about GDP per capita and how it's basically become the dominant measure of progress of our societies, that's the kind of work I've done now for over 20 years. My first publication was in '94 in this area. And it's interesting how GDP became about production. It came about because a lot to do with the Second World War, in that, Simon Kuznets, who was the architect of GDP, was working in the 30s when there was such a depression here in this country. There was actually a German economist called Ernst Wagemann who was working in Germany because of the hyperinflation, all those things, about how they could measure, get a measure of the financial activity in economies. But the Second World War came, and Britain particularly was needing to produce a lot of stuff. We need to produce a lot of aircraft, a lot of tanks, a lot of bombs, and so production became the focus of the UK economy. And it was the fastest period of growth in the UK economy ever. We had double-digit growth. Keynes was very involved in how we defined the production accounts. And then after the Second World War, the things that we produced in the UK and the US had destroyed a lot of Europe, ironically, and so we needed to recreate Europe. And so again, there was a massive emphasis on production. And the national accounting system, which started to get formalized in the early 50s, became predominantly production-focused. And we're stuck with that, really. We still have our national accounting system, which is very focused on physical production. I love the way that you ended, Mariano, with that actually leisure is very productive, because it's very productive. And I haven't thought of that phrase. I'm going to steal that. I'll credit you, but I'm going to steal that. It's very clever. So I think most of my career, I joined a think tank in London in the year 2001, and was starting to think about progress in different ways. For quite a few years, I was the guy in the corner with long hair that nobody noticed. And then slowly we started to produce stuff that became interesting and successful, and it was because we focused on experience instead of production. We called it well-being at the time, but and I still like the term well-being, but it was about experience well-being, and we did projects on schools, we did projects on local communities about what was people's experience of life. And then we created this indicator in 2006 called the Happy Planet Index. And the idea of the Happy Planet Index was that good lives are really important, and so we should think about how nations produce good lives, happy and long lives. That seems to be the aim, the ultimate outcome of a society. Are its citizens enjoying life? Are they healthy? But we also have to remember that there's a cost to that, and the cost to that is how many resources we use to get there. And the pressure on the planet, that's why it's called the Happy Planet Index, is actually what sustainability is about. That actually, if we're going to leave resources for future generations, then we need to think about how many resources we use in order to get there. So it becomes an efficiency measure. How do we turn the fundamental input to our economy, which is our planetary resources, into the ultimate outcome, which is good lives for its citizens? And the Happy Planet Index was really quite successful, and in the sense that a lot of people read it, it got downloaded a lot, and opened up an opportunity for us to do further interesting work in this area. Now, one of the reason I think the Happy Planet Index was successful was not because of the statistics. When I first did the first draft of it, I called it Sustainable Wellbeing Index. And there's the clue. If we'd published calling Sustainable Wellbeing Index, there's no way it would have had the impact than because we called it the Happy Planet Index. And using the word happiness in there just made me realize how attractive the concept of happiness is to people. If you want to talk in public, using the word happiness is very, very powerful, because people have a thirst for it, have an interest in it. And in a way, again, as Mariana said, happiness is in our nature. We are human beings. We all experience happiness and unhappiness. And so it's something that we're very familiar with because we experience it. And from a purely biological perspective, happiness is highly functional for us. Our emotions are all functional. Fear is functional. It helps us avoid threats. Anger is functional. It helps us respond to injustices. It helps us, respond to violations of our norms even sometimes. These are highly functional for us. They help us act in the world. And happiness, as Barbara Fredrickson and others talk about, is very functional. It helps us, create opportunities, seize opportunities. Enthusiasm, we're bursting with energy, and we're mobilizing this energy in order to achieve a goal or something like that. So by working with this sort of spirit of happiness, we can actually start to think more about how nations should organize themselves more effectively. And as probably some of you know, I did a TED Talk in 2010, but you probably don't know I wrote a book for TED. It's the only book I've written because I'm really, really lazy, and I find books really, really hard work to write. But there's a book I wrote called The Happiness Manifesto. It's a TED book. It's an e-book. You can download it from Amazon, but it's a download book. But in it, I basically articulated what I thought public policy should be about. That if we're really to take the concept of happiness and well-being seriously, the dog isn't happy, is he? But if we're really to take it seriously, then actually it is very, very radical for how we would organize public policy. And really, governments do three things mainly. So they influence and shape the economy. They deliver public services, and local governments shape localities and local spaces. Those are the three main things that governments do. So if we think of policies in terms of the economy from a well-being and a happiness perspective, then, what should government policy be about? Well, we know unemployment is hugely corrosive to people's well-being. We know that it's not only, it's probably 3 times the effect on people's well-being as just purely the loss of income, because it takes us out of a realm of meaning, of participation and relationships, and a sense of purpose and a sense of structure to life even. People don't cope very well when there's no structure to their lives. Unemployment is very disorientating to us. It's also a scarring thing. We know that people who've been made unemployed, the effects last for quite a long time. So we should think a lot about, creating full employment in the economy or creating opportunities. Doesn't mean it has to be full-time, by the way. I think 21 hours work a week might be a really good solution about sharing work around the economy. We have many people who work too long hours and some people who don't work enough hours. There's quite a simple redistribution there. But we also have to think about the quality of work. That, if really it's about creating work that is nourishing for people from a perspective as well. So when governments bandy around that, this supermarket has just moved into the area and it's creating 200 jobs, well, what's the quality of those jobs? Because if they've knocked out of business lots of local shops where people had a lot more time to interact with members of the community, one is they may not have made any net jobs because they killed them over here, and two, they probably reduced the quality of jobs. So we have to think about quality as well as quantity of jobs. Second big economic policy is to tackle financial inequalities. And I don't just mean income. Income inequality is corrosive, but access to capital inequalities is massively difficult. People getting out of difficult circumstances. The video that you showed, I really liked it. Has it got an audio on the original? Yeah. But, I'm the boy in that picture. I'm from good middle-class family. In fact, better than that, a wealthy middle-class family. I had everything fed to me, and I sort of felt most of my adult life should be about giving back to the privilege that I had. But I'm relatively unusual in my peer group, and most go off and become bankers. But those circumstances do shape lives. And actually, there's things like the Grameen Bank and things like that which give micro loans to people are fantastic. And we need those in every inner city. I know Chicago's done a lot of work in this area. There's a lot of work on co-production. But we really, really need to work out how do we help people get ahead in that space, not get ahead, get going. So the second one is public services. I mean, there's lots of public services, but the two big main ones are health and education. And there's just so much to be done in both of those realms from a happiness and well-being perspective. The school system is so narrow. They become exam factories for our kids. The pressure on teenagers to do well. It becomes a rationing system for jobs. It's not about education. It's about a meal ticket towards a job. And we could do so much more in our schools about having flourishing schools where we have, why do we stack all our kids into be the same age as they go up through? Let's have more mixed ages with elders and mentors and buddies. Let's have much more social education. Let's have much more talking about how they do it, how they work. Let's think much more about arts and music, because these are different ways of being creative and they're undervalued in our education system massively. Health, there can be no health without mental health. This is just so obvious. If you've got a physical body that's sort of healthy, but you're scarred mentally, this is a real problem. This is the real problem of Syria at the moment. I mean, yes, there's people losing lives and limbs, and that's tragic, but the mental scarring of war for generations to come in that area is absolutely massive. Refugees arrive traumatized from their experiences in those areas. No trust, no nothing, unable to build close personal relationships. Kids who've seen absolute horrors are going to live with those for their whole lives. So public mental health in both a development and also obviously in our communities. You walk around the streets of Florida, people on the street, most of them have got diagnosable mental health disorders with nothing to actually help them be. Mental health is a massive thing we need to think about. If we think about our localities, I think it's about how do we engage with citizens. I think that politics has got very disengaged from citizens. The Trump effect, the Brexit effect are all a lot to do with the disengagement between what is seen as a political elite and the population. Actually, I know lots of politicians. I think most of them are very good people who want to serve. But the way that our media works and the way that politicians have worked is that they've effectively had them in their own sort of their little enclave, and they're separate from people. We need to bring politics much closer to people. But how we build our environments is massively important. If you build a terribly designed housing estate, you've got that for 30 years, the effects of that badly designed estate. We need to design spaces which help people mingle, that help people connect with each other, help people be creative. We need aesthetics and beauty in our environments. All of us, rich or poor, appreciate aesthetics and beauty, seeing the sky, trees, nature. We know there's lots of research showing that access to green spaces reduces crime. That people respect their environment when they've got access to these spaces. So those are the 6 main policies I think that government should do, which is create good jobs, tackle financial inequalities, develop flourishing schools, promote complete mental health, engage with citizens, build good foundations. And to that I add a 7th, which is measure what matters, which is that governments need to have systematic measurement about well-being and quality of life, about ecological and environmental impact, about the social justice issues that we were talking about, and that we invest so much in our economic indicators and we invest so little in our indicators of people's experience. So I would add to that measure what matters. So that's kind of my ideas. As I said, they are summarized in my little book called the Happiness Manifesto. Thank you very much.